We're going to start with some myths, because if we can deal with myths right off the top, that kind of answers a bunch of questions. So here's some things that we've heard about toilet training a particular individual in the past. He's too old to be trained at this point. Here's another one. She can't be trained. She has XYZ syndrome, whatever that is. He'll train himself when he's ready. That's very popular. Well, we don't want to push him. He'll train himself when he's ready. And she doesn't have the necessary prerequisite skills, so, we haven't tried yet. These are mythologies about toilet training, right, that are really important to understand as myths, not as facts from the outset. There's no such thing as someone who's too old to be trained. There's no such thing as a syndrome that won't allow someone to be trained. If they haven't trained themselves already and they're over the age of about 3 or 4, they're not going to figure it out on their own. And let's talk for a minute about prerequisite skills. So depending upon who you ask, the kinds of prerequisite skills that you'll hear about are these kinds of things. Before you start training, the child has to be able to stay dry for at least a couple hours at a time, have a regular bowel movement schedule, follow simple directions, demonstrate that he or she is uncomfortable with dirty diapers, has to be able to ask to use the toilet or to wear underwear, has to be able to pull up pants up and down independently. I mean, some combination of these are very common in the list of prerequisites for toilet training. Guess what? There's no research. Zilch, nada, bupkis. Zero research to support any of those prerequisites. Somebody thought that they were a good idea and wrote them down, and everybody else went, well, yeah, that makes sense, we guess. So now it's become urban myth that these are prerequisites. Don't worry about prerequisites. If the person can sit on the toilet for at least a few minutes, you're golden. If that's not the case, we've got to teach him to sit on the toilet for at least a few minutes, and we'll try to get to that maybe at the end of the day and maybe tomorrow, okay? But otherwise, please don't worry about prerequisites. We don't want your notion of prerequisites to kind of get in the way of you starting this endeavor. Now, there are 2 ways of toilet training that are very popular. One is called the Brazelton Way, which is endorsed by the American Academy of Pediatrics and the Canadian Pediatric Society. This is the work of T. Barry Brazelton, very popular, very well-known, very much respected early childhood educator. And the goal in this approach to toilet training is for the child to think potty training is his idea, not the adults. And it includes things like taking the child to the store to buy a potty, encouraging the child to sit on the potty fully clothed, emptying the child's soiled diaper in the toilet in front of him so he can make the connection between soiling and the potty. And then the child sitting on the potty and actually voiding is supposed to happen kind of simultaneously, right? And the advice is that if the child reacts negatively at any point, you pull back so that you're constantly going at the child's pace, which is, of course, a terrifically good idea if it works. If his pace, however, is too slow, he ends up being 35 years old and not toilet trained. So there could be a problem with this approach for people who are not responsive to it. Another strategy that is popular is called the modeling method, and this was put forward in North America by a guy named Dr. Phil, who many of you know is a television psychologist, in a book called Potty Train Your Child in Less Than a Day. And basically, this approach consists of getting a doll that pees. You can buy these dolls in most stores. Some of them also poop if you feed them certain things. Show the doll peeing in the potty, get really excited, get rid of the diapers on the kid, give your child lots of fluids to drink, and then sit him on the toilet. And if he pees, have a potty party with a favorite superhero and do this 10 times and you're home free, which is also terrific if it works. But, if it doesn't, then you're kind of hooped. So what's important to ask yourself is how is that working for you? For those of you outside of North America, this is, in fact, Dr. Phil, and that's a very famous thing that he says over and over again. How's that working for you? So we have, I mean, there's no problem with these mainstream approaches to toilet training. If they're working for you and they've worked for your child, terrific, right? As I said, they're endorsed by major pediatric societies, and in no way do either Katie or I want to disrespect either one of them or any version of them in this presentation today. But the problem is, what if a mainstream approach doesn't work? That's why you're here. That's why there's like 700 or so people on this webcast today, because it hasn't worked for you. So there are really two options here, both of which are research-based. Katie's going to talk about a structured, intensive approach to toilet training called rapid toilet training that's based on a book from 1974 by Azarin and Fox called Toilet Training in Less Than a Day. And this approach is very intensive, but it's also short. So we're talking 8 to 10 hours a day for 5 to 10 days at home. And if you do it the way Katie's going to tell you to do it, nobody can guarantee that anything is going to work, but there's a high probability that you'll have success at the end of that period of time. But it's very intensive. This approach can be used most easily, of course, with young children who are not in school, who are receiving some kind of home-based early intervention because they're already home. Mind you, lots of kids are already home right now because of the COVID. So it can also be used with older children, but they have to be at home during the training period. So this may or may not be an option for you depending upon who you're thinking of supporting. The second approach we're going to talk about, I'm going to talk about tomorrow, is what I call the long way. It's still a structured approach to toileting, but it's less intensive. It occurs during daytime hours over several weeks. And it's also based on current research. You can see a number of studies since 2000 that have talked about variations of this approach. And because it's less intensive, and because it can be done in a wide range of environments, not just at home, this is the method usually employed with adults and with school-aged children and adolescents, because it can be implemented over a longer period of time in homeschool and community settings. So I'm going to talk about the long way tomorrow. We think it's important to give you both options because then it's your choice of how to go about this. But there are many common factors across the two approaches, but there are also significant differences. What are the decision points here? Rapid toilet training can be used with someone who can stay at home for at least a bunch of 8 to 10 hours a day for at least 5 to 10 consecutive days. So it can't be used if the person is in school and can't meet that time requirement. If the person's in school and can't meet that time requirement, you're going to do the long way. Okay? But if what's on the left side of your screen applies, you could use rapid toilet training. Rapid toilet training requires an adult who can devote the time and energy to train for the rapid toilet training period. So mom or dad or grandma or a BI or, I don't know, somebody has to be available to do it. If that's not possible, then you're going to do the long way. The trainee has to be able to navigate independently to the toilet and sit on it for up to 30 minutes at a time if provided with a fun activity. Up to 30 minutes at a time if provided with a fun activity. So it could be any activity. It could be, I don't know, an iPad or puzzles or a book to read or music to listen to or whatever. He can be occupied while he's sitting on the toilet, but he has to be able to sit there for up to 30 minutes at a time, right? Which is another reason it has to be comfortable. If that's not possible, either he can't navigate independently or he won't sit on it for up to 30 minutes at a time, even when providing with a really fun activity, then you're going to have to go the long way, which is fine. I mean, we don't care how you do it. We just want to make sure you make a good decision here. And then finally, rapid toilet training requires that it's safe for the trainee to drink lots of liquids. It's safe. He doesn't have some kind of, I don't know, don't give this kid too much liquid problem. And they'll drink sips of one or more beverages when offered throughout the day. They don't have to guzzle a whole lot at once, but if you offer, they'll take sips. Sips of apple juice, sips of water, sips of Coke, sips of whatever, right? That when you offer, they'll sip. And you're going to be offering a lot because you want them to sip a lot. If it's not safe and or this is not a drinker, someone who will drink sip after sip, you're going to go the long way. So all 4 of these have to be in place for you to do rapid toilet training. And if any one of them isn't in place, you should think about the long way. Regardless of how you do it, toilet training is about good instruction. Instruction that's carefully sequenced, that's systematically planned, that's systematically delivered. We're not talking magic wands here. We're not talking think about it long enough and the child will, intuit what he's supposed to do. Systematic, careful instruction. It's also instruction that's individualized to start wherever the individual is at, right? So especially with the long way, we're going to talk about figuring out where is this person at and how do we figure out how to start there. And it's instruction that employs appropriate motivational incentives and error correction feedback. So there are specific things you do when the person is successful at doing whatever you're trying to teach them to do in the toilet, and there are specific things you don't do and that you do when an accident occurs. So it's really about good instruction.